All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Now, before I jump into my stories, I did want to say, for those of you who joined me on the Thursday Zoom party, I had a really great time. You guys were awesome. That was a lot of fun. Everybody's energy was right. Everybody was clicking. Everybody was vibing. It was almost like we all had known each other for years. And it was really great to put faces to names because I recognize a lot of you by your usernames when you post in the comments section. But of course, I don't really know what a lot of you look like. So it was kind of cool to see, okay, this is that person or this is that person. Okay, really, really dope. And I really like that everybody respected each other's viewpoints on things because we had a bunch of different conversations. Some centered around pop culture, some around politics, some around life, some around things that are a little bit heavier. And even when people may give a perspective that might have been different or something that was left field, everybody had an open ear, which I really appreciated. So it kept the energy very positive. And so what was funny is every time we thought it was about to end, then new people would get on and the energy would come back up. And you just keep going and keep going. And so that was a lot of fun. And like I said, I didn't know how it was going to go because I know sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch the replay of the lives that I do. And sometimes I'll read the chat. And sometimes in the chat, folks be going at it. It's like World War III in the chat section. You stupid NF. He said, you just got it wrong. I guess you couldn't interpret it. And so like they be doing all that. And so I'm like, man, I don't know how Zoom's going to work because everybody has a microphone. So it could have gone one of two ways, but it was a lot of fun. And it was a pleasant distraction from some other things that had been going on. I've had a very up and down 2 weeks. Like anything crazy that you can think of has happened in the last 2 weeks. I'm just like, what the heck? Like literally even the day we did the Zoom party, I found out I had a cousin that got shot 8 times while they were at work. Fortunately, he's going to pull through. But, that was crazy in itself. And I found that out while I was at work with the kids. And, of course, you get bad news. You can't wear it on your face when you're with kids because the minute they realize something is wrong with the adults in the room, the energy changes. And so I had that happen. And then around Juneteenth, we buried another cousin who was shot. It was a totally different kind of situation where it was a mishap or a mistake where he was just kind of standing and was collateral to something else that was happening. And so, you had that happen. So I don't know, for some reason in the summer is always a really sad time, at least in my family. Something's always happening to somebody. So that made me a little nervous. But, it was a great time. It was so funny, though, because I thought it was only going to be like maybe 1 or 2 hours. Maybe 9 to about 11 o'clock. I'll be in bed, knocked out by 11:15. Oh, no. We carried that thing till about 1:30 in the morning. And by the time we hit about midnight, Brianna, who was on it, was like, dang, Calvin, you looking a little tired. I'm like, yeah, I get up every morning at 6 and I'm over here doing the math in my head. And so we kept trying to wind down the conversation, but you already know how it is. Like when black folks say goodbye, it's not really goodbye. That just means you're going to keep talking for another 20 minutes and keep going and keep going. And it reminded me of, I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you're a kid and you're with your parents and they go and visit somebody maybe, or even if it's like church gets out and your parents are doing all that talking. And your parents, I don't know if you're at somebody's house, your parents do that speech, well, we're gonna head on out. They always do that thing where they hit that leg. We're gonna head on out. And then you as a kid are like, yes, finally, because it's like 7:45. You're like, okay, if we leave now, we can make it in time for the Simpsons. Perfect. And then you forget that if they walk your parents to the car, it's gonna be more conversation. And that friend is like, oh, well, let me walk y'all to the car. Great. All right, here we go. And then that's another hour. And so they walk to the car, but they walk like super slow. And at this point, your mother's already giving you the keys. You're sitting in the back of the car waiting with the door open because she wouldn't let you turn the car on to turn the windows down because it's July and it's hot. So you just got to sit with the door open. Then you get fussed at because she say you're draining the battery, so close the door. So either stand outside or sit in the car. But they just keep walking and talking, and then they stop. Then they walk and talk some more, and then they stop in another place. Then they go back. You be looking out the window. What y'all doing? And so finally your parents get in the car. It's finally time to go, but you think you're about to pull off because the car is on. And then that friend has one more thing to say, so the parents put the window down. Then they talking for another 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, and then you missed the Simpsons. You get home, it's 9:56. But anyway, it was really great. I had a lot of fun. So I've been going down the rabbit hole of music documentaries, and the most recent one that I watched was the Mary J. Blige documentary. It's available on Amazon Prime, and this documentary pretty much goes into detail about where Mary J. Blige was internally as she was putting together the My Life album. And pretty much at that point in her life, she had been dealing with a bunch of different things, but she had also been thrown into fame because What's the 411 hit, and it hit hard, and then, okay, now we need you to match that same success. And so as she's putting together My Life, there's just so many things in her life that happen. And so it does a great job of just talking about the human aspect of what it is that entertainers deal with, and the fact that, like I say all the time on this channel, celebrities are human just like the rest of us, and they have their trials and tribulations. I sound like I'm preaching now. They have their trials and their tribulations, and the different things that they deal with. And sometimes things happen to you in childhood and young adulthood and your teenage years, and even when you're in your 70s and 80s, you still are responding to things in response to how those things from the past affected you. And so she kind of covers a lot of that and just what was happening with her as far as relationships and stuff that happened with her family and addictive behaviors and how she found ways to kind of appease different voids that were there. So it's more of a very personal journey. If you're looking at it from the perspective of wanting to see more about the production and how did they layer the vocal and who was in the studio singing this, and when they wrote this, how did that go, and were they at the studio at 3 a.m. fighting because they didn't like how this song was written in that key. There wasn't a lot of that. There was still an inclusion and conversation of what was happening in the studio, but this to me came off more as just really her own personal journey kind of. So I think if you're somebody who just wants to really understand who she is as a person, that's really what makes it a good watch. One of the sad parts, I think, too, was just even seeing Andre Harrell, and you kind of forget, like, dang, he's not even with us anymore. And it just reminds you that so many people have passed on in the last few years. And it's a part of life. As you get older, people will transition. Some, it seems like they transition earlier than others. But the other good part about life is that you also do meet new people and you get to create and build new relationships. And life is this interesting cycle where there's hardship, but to balance out the hardship, there's good things that happen at the same time. And it's all about how you perceive that balance of both. And so it was a very interesting watch. And it's crazy because, a lot of those songs from even an album like My Life, these are like songs that are like the soundtrack to your childhood, depending on where you're born or when you're born. And I always think, like, for people who grew up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of projects that came out that were pivotal to our childhood. And it's so crazy because you don't even realize, especially when you're talking lyrics, how those songs will connect with you years later as an adult. Like, I think back, Mary was always being played when I was a kid. When What's the 411 dropped, that was everywhere, especially around cookout season. When My Life dropped, that was everywhere. When Share My World dropped, that was everywhere. And so they had all, Mary had all those songs, and you'd be like 8 years old singing Gotta Believe and Mary's Joint. And then fast forward to when you're like 22, 23, you done got dumped, and those same songs have a different meaning now, because now the lyrics mean so much more. Why can't we work it out? Why, baby, can't we try? Like, it just has such a different meaning after you done got dumped, you in the room all sad and depressed, And I was always one of those dramatic people. Like, I had that really bad breakup. I talked about it in the podcast, but I just had this period where I just used to sit in the dark room with just the music, because I guess I'm kind of a crier now, but as a teenager and as a young adult, I wasn't very emotional. Like, my closest friends can tell you, I've always been a brute. I'm still awkward sometimes. But anyway, during that time period, I was in this phase where I was just playing all this heavy, sad songs. The same songs I used to party to now had a different meaning. You know what I mean? Gotta believe. And so, yeah, it was like Anthony Hamilton, please stay. Life Jennings, goodbye. Life Jennings, let's stay together. Life Jennings, cry. I was going through all the Life Jennings stuff. And even like Joss Stone had this song, Spoiled, where in the line she talks about, what did she say? I tried to tell myself I'd get over you in a week or two, but that was about a year ago. I'm only 2 months into the breakup. Oh, that's me. It's so dramatic. But no, that was a really great watch. I would like to see more documentaries about a lot of pivotal albums from that era as well. Like, I'd love to see one about, listen, if they're already out, please put it in the comment section. I'll check it out. But I'd love to see one about, like, maybe the Fugees, the score. I think that would be a great one to watch. Tribe Called Quest already has a documentary about all of their albums, so that's a good one to watch too. Also, rest in peace, Phife Dawg, as well as Gift of Gab as well. I saw that he just passed on the 18th, which is also sad, so rest in peace to him. There's also a short film on him. It premiered at Tribeca, now that I think about it, in 2016. I think it's called Gift of Gab as well. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes, but it kind of talks about his experience dealing with health concerns and still being a performer. But yeah, I'd love to see additional documentaries, maybe like the Jodeci, that last Jodeci album. I'd love to see a documentary on what happened with that, just because there was so much happening within the group. Even more of the early 2000s albums. I think like Tidra Moses, Complex Simplicity is an album that gets slept on, but I'm sure there's a great story behind it. I'd love to hear about what her and Paul Poley were doing in the production room. Maybe a TLC Crazy Sexy Cool, or Janet. Well, I know Janet got a documentary coming out, but I think it's focused on the latter half, so I don't know if it would cover like the Velvet Rope, but I think that would be a great documentary. But I am a music junkie. I love a good documentary. I love to hear the behind the scenes of how they did stuff. I love to hear the stories of how they were just playing around, and then something they were playing around with became a huge song and just blew up. I love that. And so the Mary J documentary is out. Another documentary that I did watch the Pink one, just because I had finished watching Mary, and then I saw Pink on the side. I was like, let me see what she's doing on hers. And so Pink has a documentary. It's called, I think it's All I Know So Far. Let me just make sure I got the title right. Y'all know I be messing up titles all the time. Yeah, All I Know So Far. Good job, Self. And so the tour covers her, or the documentary covers her experience as she tours in Europe. Like she's doing a stadium tour, and at the same time, her whole family is on a tour with her. So it's the toddler that she has, which is, I want to say 2 years old. There's another child that's like 7 or 8, and then the husband is there. And just the experience of being a mom and trying to be an artist and perform, but still giving equal time to your family and your kids. And again, you got a 2-year-old. 2-year-olds are inquisitive. They just learned how to walk 9 months earlier, so now they never sit down, and all they do is run and touch everything and get into everything. And you're stressed out and panicked because you think they're gonna hurt themselves, and they literally will fall off down the stairs and be just fine and keep playing. But yeah, so like all of that was happening, so it's a very interesting watch. And then she still has to put together the show, and you know, somebody like Pink, I think when she tours, she's not even on the ground. She's just 80 feet up the whole show. You know, she's flying and spinning and going here and getting shot there and swinging here and dropping down into the stage. And then it was cool because I saw Stacey Campbell as one of the backing vocalists. Like Stacey Campbell, I swear, works with everybody. Like Stacey Campbell has had a career. Give her a documentary as well. Like if you know, like she's been a supporting vocalist for pretty much everybody in the industry. I've seen her. She's worked with Tina. She's worked with Janet. She's worked with Pink. There's some other people she's worked with. She's had a great career. I'm sure that's a lot of fun. I'm sure there's some really great stories out of that experience. But the documentary I'm looking forward to watching as well. It's already premiered at Tribeca Film Festival this year, but there is a Rick James documentary I can't wait to watch. I think you can stream it if Tribeca still is giving access on the website for people who paid. I don't know if that festival is over already, but I know it's going to air on Showtime soon. It's called The Sound and Fury of Rick James. I can't wait to watch that because listen, Rick James has lived, or he had lived, all right? But I will say, I think when it comes to Rick James, a lot of times his contributions to music sometimes are left out of the conversation, and I think that's because as time progressed, depending on when you were born and what you remember, like for me, most of the time as a kid when I heard Rick James, it was because of a headline that was in the news, and so it overshadowed the music. But I think he contributed so much to music, especially when you're talking about the fact that he was unapologetically himself, and he was making these really funky songs at a time period where in black music, especially those early 80s, everybody was going the very easy adult contemporary route because FM radio at the time was not playing black music. If it had too much of a kick and it could be somewhat associated with disco or funk, they weren't playing it thanks to the racism that existed within the disco sucks movement. We talked about that on a different in the news. I think it's the one where I was talking about the Blige documentary and just how, you know, the whole disco sucks movement wasn't even about disco. It was more so an attack on black music in general. But Rick James during that time period never really sold out artistically. He still was, everything was still gritty and funky, and then he was calling out MTV because, you know, this is the time when they weren't playing a lot of black videos, and he had no problem going in on MTV and dragging everybody. And then even with the proteges that we got introduced to, so Tina Marie, who ended up having a huge career, or even Mary Jane Girls, or him giving a hit to Eddie Murphy, or even putting some a resurgence into the Temptations with Standing on the Top and kind of putting them back out there. You know, a group that had been out for 30 plus years and their time had been come and gone, and it's like, oh no, we got some more hits for y'all. Here y'all go, boom, and that helped to open doors for them as a group. And then come down a little bit later down the line, and now you have songs like Treat Her Like a Lady that become a hit because, again, they're now relevant. And so I think he has a great career as well, so I'm anxious to see what all's in there. I know it's going to be a whole bunch of stuff, but I can't wait to watch. Side note, for those who really do like documentaries as well, Cinemax has a great show called Tour Bus Chronicles. I don't know if there's a new season, but it's presented in the cartoon visual format, but they've had some really great episodes about what happened with a lot of different artists while they were on tour. So Morris Day and the Time, Parliament and the Funkadelics, Bootsy Collins, Prince. There's a bunch of different people, so that's a really great watch as well. Anyway, moving on. And then shout out to these black TikTok creators who are on strike as far as putting out content because they're tired of other people stealing their content and getting all the acclaim, the credit, and the money for stuff that they did not create, and let alone they barely could emulate properly. And so kudos to them. One of the things that's been happening on the social platform TikTok is you have a lot of black creators who come up with different dances or different content, and other creators go and steal their stuff. And usually these other creators already have a large following, so when they steal the content, of course, that's when it really blows up. And so you watch them get different kind of TV specials and end up at NBA All-Star games teaching choreography that they did not create, and so on and so forth. And so finally, a lot of black TikTokers were like, you know what, we've had enough. Because you initially first saw this happen or really blow up. The first story I remember that really blew up was around Renegade. I remember there was the black girl that made the Renegade dance, and then a few of the popular TikTokers that were like white women or white girls went and pretty much learned the choreography, did it on their channel, and it blows up, millions of views, and now, you know, they're teaching it on TV to different celebrities and everything like that. And because there was enough backlash, finally people had to start admitting like, okay, well we got it from this channel. And I think TikTok has it set up where even if you borrow somebody else's stuff at this point now, it will still link you back to the original creator, which is good. But because there was enough backlash, that young lady, I think they let her go on the Ellen show and open and everything like that. But you've seen a certain pattern. So you saw that Meg Thee Stallion had recently come out with a new song, and a lot of black TikTok creators were like, we just won't make a dance to this one. Because one of the things that's happened, at least in the last 2 or 3 years, is artists come out with a song, people make a challenge or a dance for it, the challenge goes viral, it helps the song really get a boost in streaming and sometimes even with radio and everything else like that. Because I'll be honest, a lot of the newer songs I'm only hearing because they've gone viral on TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but there's enough TikToks that find their way on Twitter and Instagram, and so I end up hearing a lot of the popular trends of whatever people are into based on what's trending on TikTok. And so people continue to pretty much borrow and steal. So everybody said, okay, we're not making one to this Meg Thee Stallion song, when in reality they have made some stuff. I'm not going to say what they've done because I think it's very clever and I don't want to spoil it. But so now the ones that like to borrow, I'll just call them the Big Reds. You remember Bring It On? Big Red was the girl that went to the hood and stole all the cheerleading routines and brought it back to the girls in the suburbs, and then they're out there struggling to sing more stay at a time. Oh, E-O, E-O. It's like, what? Okay, so yeah, so now they're all struggling to come up with stuff. And the funniest thing is, I was watching just some of the things that I guess you can call them the colonizers on TikTok have stolen. Watching them come up with stuff on their own has been the most entertaining thing. I was watching these clips and I'm like, what is this? Wait, what? what? So that has been some entertainment. So good for y'all. That's right. Y'all stop stealing our stuff. It's so funny how people say we're inferior at everything, but everything we do, folks be stealing. And it's kind of like even a conversation when people talk about what's internet culture. I'm like, no, there's no such thing as, when it comes to like African American contributions to culture and all that, y'all don't get to just latch onto it and claim it as internet culture, and we've all been doing that. Absolutely not. What has happened in the last 10 years is finally, because of social media, you have people of all different walks of life sharing the same communicative space, which is cool. However, people may have not necessarily interacted with different groups of people over time because of where they lived or who they associated with or just how it was set up wherever they lived at. And now you're seeing what black people are doing and people are latching onto it and then trying to claim it as internet culture. And half the time they get the context wrong. This is why for all of 2019 and 2020, folks thought people were saying, ooh, Chile. I was like, what kind of nonsense? So why would people say Chile? And then there was some idiot who made a whole post because they thought black folks were talking about the country Chile, and they made this whole post about how we were like selfish enough to go after a country that's been oppressed by the U.S. I'm like, first of all, we're saying child. That's what your grandma used to say. Ooh, child. What are y'all been? See, that's what we were talking about. Like, stop. Folks want to latch on to elements and bits of culture that really are not theirs and then try to carry the conversation, lead the conversation, and be the face of the conversation and got the whole conversation wrong. I ought to be embarrassed, all right? It's kind of like even the conversation around Juneteenth. What I saw it on, I don't remember what website, but it was somebody that was talking about how Juneteenth was about celebrating diversity. I read that thing again just to make sure I wasn't crazy. Let me scroll back and read, make sure I read it. Okay. Let me just move on. Like, literally, so good for them. Like, again, y'all stop stealing from these folks. Like, if you are as good as you think you are, you should be able to come up with stuff on your own. Because, again, we already know, like, again, there's a conversation of access and resources anyway. A lot of these people who really end up blowing up on TikTok already came from money to begin with. And so they don't even need the same acclaim and everything to get into certain doors because the doors are already open for them. So when you go and take away, opportunities that belong to people who have done the work, what does that say about you? I don't care if you give them credit. Like, stop stealing from people's stuff. If you like their work so bad, post their work on your channel and gas them up so they can get their leverage. But of course, folks don't want to challenge that kind of privilege. But again, our stuff has always been getting stolen. It's happened in movies, television, fashion, clothes, food, movie ideas, video games, anything you can think of. Somebody found a way to steal it. Absolutely terrible. That's why I'd be like, don't be sharing everything because folks will find a way. Anyway, moving on. And then some of you were asking whether or not I was excited about seeing the movie Karen. And to be honest, my answer is no. I don't even think I'm going to see that movie. One, it already looks terrible. But two, I just feel that because that kind of behavior has not gone anywhere, why are we making a movie about it like it's not something that's everyday reality for a lot of people. And what we're talking about, this is a movie that is pretty much writing that conversation of white women that feel entitled, and when they don't get their way, everybody must suffer. You know, I always call it punitive entitlement, where when somebody's inconvenienced and now everybody has to suffer. And so you have a lot of white women who do different things like cry or call the police or make bad and fake allegations or do something that puts somebody else in danger so that they can be comfortable, all at everybody else's expense, specifically a lot of times black people. And so I feel some kind of way about it because none of that has really gone anywhere. You even just saw the recent TikTok trend where you have all these white women who are making videos of themselves crying on cue and then stopping and smiling and giving a sinister look like, don't F with me. So clearly that behavior hasn't gone anywhere. So why are we going out of our way to try to turn this into a movie that we can all laugh at when this is still happening every day? Where literally some people's lives are in danger because white women are making false police claims saying this man has a gun, or this man is trying to rape me, or this man is trying to kill me, or this man is following me. You know, two people walking to the train station, a white woman thinks the guy that's behind her is trying to rape her, like so on and so forth. And so you're watching people literally almost get their lives in danger at the expense of white women because they're making these claims and because they want the world to stop and revolve around them. So I don't think this is a good idea for a movie, especially not right now with everything that's been happening. Like literally think about it. In the same week that we lost George Floyd, the Amy Cooper situation took place. Like those were like 2 days apart, literally. And so not much has changed. And I'm just one of those people where it's like, there's certain things that I'm just not going to be cool with at the time. I also think there's this wave of writing on black trauma for entertainment and profit. I do think that you can tell our stories, but some of this is a straight up mockery. So I'm good on that. You know, I mean, maybe if it's on TV or something for free while I'm half sleeping, flipping channels, I might check it out or something. But I don't know if I'm going to be the one to go and see it. That's all I'm saying. If there's any movie I'm looking forward to seeing, the main one I'm waiting for is Candyman. Now, it was supposed to come out last year, but of course it got delayed due to COVID. But that's the one I've been waiting for. The trailer looked really, really good. I think it's a movie that, especially if you saw the original, that's a movie that kind of stayed with a lot of people for years. So I'm like, all right, let's see how this one turns out, this revamped version. So I would like to see. I might check out Space Jam 2. It kind of looks a little terrible, but for the nostalgia, I will still watch and support. And even the movie about the woman that was a dancer and she goes on that crazy escapade and she made a whole tweet thread about it and it went viral and then they turned it into a movie. I would like to see that one. I think it's called Zola or Lola or something like that. But I'm interested in seeing those. But as far as the Karen movie, right, there'll be another Karen moment in like another 2 weeks anyway. We'll be talking about, I'm sure, by then. I didn't get a chance to really talk about the whole Britney Spears thing because some of you guys kept asking it with her as well. I did listen to her testimony that she had in court. It's like a 23-minute testimony or affidavit or whatever you want to call it, where she's telling the judge all of the conditions about her conservatorship that she does not like, which was very interesting because this was the first time she's been able to go in front of a judge and talk about her experience since 2008, literally. And so I haven't really followed everything in her journey. However, I did mention on one of the lives, I started watching, there's a YouTube channel called Deep Dive that had like a 5 or 6 part series on everything that's happened with that conservatorship until the present. It gives a lot of really good detail and puts everything into perspective so you understand what's happening in 2021. Long story short, you know, she's been in a conservatorship, and normally people that normally get put in a conservatorship is because they're not competent enough to do basic things, and it's for their own safety. That's what it's supposed to be. A lot of times, people who have mental health issues get it. People who are a lot older, maybe they get dementia or their memory goes bad, they start forgetting things. You know, younger family members sometimes will put them into one of those and they'll control their money and everything like that just to make sure they're all good. They put Britney in one of these back in 2008 just after a few moments that were deemed erratic, and from there, she's been in this ever since. So she's not allowed to drive her own car, operate her own social media, operate her own phone, have any more children unless it's been granted, and apparently it has not been, so she can't have any more children, and she wants more children. She can't get married. She wants to get married again. She can't do that. There's all these different things that she can't do. I don't even think she can leave the house without permission, and she can't even be with her kids unattended. Like, there's all kind of things that happen. Even with vacationing, the vacations are literally controlled. So pretty much she is just kind of locked away. And the only time she seems to have any free will is when they throw her up on the stage and make her perform. That seems like to be the one time where she gets 2 hours to do whatever she wants almost. And so as I followed this, I was like, you know, it's just jacked up what people will do for money. Because it seems like with the conservatorship, it's just people keeping her in it because as long as they can control what she's allowed to do, everybody gets paid. Because all of her lawyers, doctors, handlers are all getting paid. And none of these people are people that she picked. these are people that were picked by those in charge of the conservatorship, which specifically is her father and some other people. So it's kind of jacked up that you're watching her own father pretty much, steal her money and do all these other things and make sure that she does not get into a space where she has her own free will. And so she talks about, being forced to tour, being forced to perform, being forced to do all these things she didn't want to do, being forced to go to rehab. And she was all for rehab, but the places that they were sending her were specifically in locations where paparazzi hangs out. And so that way, when she's, seen leaving the place crying, paparazzi gets the shot, you throw it in the magazines, and yeah, we told y'all she was crazy. And so you keep doing that, and it's a cycle. And I'm just like, man, it's jacked up. But you could tell that something had been a little off. I always felt that they were drugging her. I've been saying that for years. It just seemed like they were drugging her, and she confirmed it. She was like, yeah, they make me take lithium. And they make her take all these different kind of pills and different medications, and some of the arguments surrounding medications play into why there were certain things she weren't allowed to do or why certain shows, and I think she was supposed to do a second Vegas residency, and they canceled that because she didn't want to comply with what rules were being put out there, allegedly. And so, absolutely crazy. Hopefully things work out for her. It's kind of jacked up. People really will just... That industry is so toxic, it can be. And the fact that literally 13 years locked away, apparently you're not competent enough to do anything, but you can do a whole tour and you can do a Vegas show and all this other stuff, everything that's making people money. But then basic things that you just beg for, you can't do. And like even her speaking voice, this is the first time I've heard her sound what you could say healthy as far as like her speaking in the court, because we've talked about how her speaking voice is very interesting, and sometimes it's dark, sometimes she sounds congested, sometimes it's very nasally or Mickey Mouse-ish. I'm like, maybe it just depends on what medicine they're giving her, but hopefully everything works out for her. Just crazy to follow, but again, greed. There's definitely some people that need to be locked up. But I suggest you check out that deep dive documentary, because unless you really understand the context of what's happening, I probably sound like I'm just talking hot air and I'm maybe being a fan and not being a realist. But it just seems like there's a lot of greed behind her. Like that documentary, just when they started dropping names and who was doing what and what the court said, I'm like, this crap is wild. It's really like a movie. It's wild. And then I did get a chance to watch the Verzuz with Bow Wow and Soulja Boy. Overall, it was entertaining to watch. This was one I really wasn't planning to watch, but I ended up watching it anyway. But it was actually entertaining. It was funny because a lot of people thought that they were going to get on the stage and fight or something, and they had all this bad blood because they had been roasting each other for weeks and weeks leading up to this. But again, like a lot of us figured, it's like, no, it's just a great way to build promo. Like you can tell that they get along, and clearly as soon as they got on stage, it was all good. But it clearly worked because they had maybe 600,000 or 700,000 people watching at any given time. I will say, versus if y'all gonna have the live audience, y'all need to make sure y'all get a hype audience or get an audience of people that are actually fans of the artist, so that it's not so dead sometimes. Because I know when Timbaland and Swiss did their live version, that crowd was dead. And this one, the crowd was a little dead too. I think with the Trina and Eve one, the crowd was a little bit hyped, mainly because Trina just knows how to really work a stage. I'm sure it would have been even hyper had Eve been there in person and not via satellite. But with this one, I was like, dang, this crowd is dead. Nothing worse than pointing the mic at the crowd and you don't hear nothing back. You know what I mean? But I will say this. People always laugh at Bow Wow and call him corny and maybe even call him a has-been. But I'll say this. He knows how to work a stage. I was thoroughly impressed with the fact that literally whatever song he played during his verses, he was going to hype it up like it had won 10 Grammys and went triple platinum in 2 days and won an Oscar. And he did stadium tours performing this song. Like every song, it didn't matter what it was, even if it was some of the cornier ones, he worked the stage. And I think that's because he comes from an era of artist development where they weren't going to send you out there until you knew how to really carry a stage anyway. I'd probably say that about somebody like a Trina as well, where there's just a hypeness that's there. Like you can really get a crowd to rock with you if you can really work a stage. Sometimes there's nothing worse than like an artist having a great song but they suck at performing. And I think with rappers, because they don't have to sing and the only thing they really have to worry about is keeping the crowd engaged, there's no reason why a rapper shouldn't be able to really work a stage. You don't got to worry about being off key. You don't got to really worry about choreography most of the time. There's not a lot of stage cues you got to worry about. You just got to keep the crowd engaged. And half the time, the crowd is already singing the song back to you anyway or rapping it. And so Bow Wow worked that little stage. I ain't even mad at him. Soulja Boy was fun to watch as well. It was kind of funny watching them roast each other while they were doing the verses. You know, Soulja Boy kept saying, oh man, that song is 10 years old. These things are old. I got the new stuff. It reminded me of how me and my brother fry each other up, or even me and my cousin Brandon be frying each other up. Growing up, we used to fry each other up about where we were from. You know, I used to be envious that he was from Atlanta and I was from Spanaway, Washington. And so I used to try to fry up Atlanta as much as I could to make it seem like Spanaway was jumping. And then all he'd have to do was find an episode of Cops, and it's nothing but Spanaway, because Spanaway was like the capital of meth at the time. And so stuff like that, but it was kind of funny watching that. Thinking back though, I'm not gonna lie, around that time period when somebody like a Bow Wow would have blown up, I was a hater hater. Like Bow Wow, B2K, any of the male acts that all the teenage girls went crazy over, I had a problem with. Maybe because we were all in the same age bracket, but I was a hater. All the girls used to have like B2K on the Word Up magazine rip-outs that were glued on their locker or their binder, or Bow Wow or Romeo or Lil Zane, wherever he's at. You know, all these different people, they used to be so pressed, and I used to be a hater. And then with Bow Wow, because he had them hazel eyes, the girls used to be like, oh my God, his eyes. I used to be like, what's wrong with my eyes? What's wrong with mine? What you don't see what we got here? So, but if I had to pick between the two, I ain't gonna lie, I prefer Bow Wow's music because I think I listened to more of his stuff growing up. I remember the "Let Me Hold You Down" went in, like that was, I think I was in high school by then, but that video made me excited about becoming an adult and going to real house parties, and like I was like, oh, I can't wait, we about to have the red cups and about to just be, and you know, he had that song Sierra I like, his debut album. I like most of the songs from the debut album. What was it, like Puppy Love, and the song with Snoop Dogg, Where My Dog's At. The debut song he had, the bounce with, like he had a few bops, but I was a hater. But you know, I bopped my head in secret a little bit. All right, this sound nice. I never had any of his albums, but you know, when it came on the radio, I was bopping my head, but being a hater. Soulja Boy, he got a few songs I like. A lot of his stuff I think works more in the club. These aren't really artists I play on like a Saturday afternoon when I'm cleaning up or something like that. But you know, I enjoyed watching both of them. They were fun to watch, so that was kind of cool. I like that they could keep the energy up. So that was cool to watch. I don't know who they have next for Verzuz, but hopefully, I don't know who's next. I think Verzuz, like I said, they're gonna have to keep changing their format now that things have opened back up and people are out and about more and more and more. It's gonna be harder to get people to sit and watch something, let alone on a Saturday. But to each his own. Anyway, moving on. And then when it comes to the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, I just got to thinking, you know, as they gave out how much time he'd be doing in those 22.5 years, I started thinking like, I guess. But I think for me, what I started thinking about, I was like, man, had that video never gone viral, where would we be today? Like, he most likely would have never been charged with anything. They would have just wrote down in the book that George Floyd was whatever they tried to paint him out to be, and they would have kept it moving. They tried to do that during the actual trial and paint him out to be just the worst offender in the world and a drug addict, and they tried to latch onto any and everything that they could latch onto to make it seem like it was 100% his fault that he died because he just didn't take care of his health and he was gonna die anyway. It was just a coincidence that, you know, him suffocating for like 9 minutes, that's just coincidence. And so I started thinking like, man, had we never got that video, where would we be? And then when I thought about that, then you start thinking about just what all had to happen. It was like you had this video go viral, you know, it spreads around, there's all of this outrage globally. Protests in the United States, protests in Europe, protests on the continent, protests in Australia, protests in Asia, protests all over the world, protests in Canada, protests in South America about police brutality because people are like, dang, y'all are just doing black people so wrong over there. Please give them some leniency, please. And so it's like you have that going on. You saw all these corporations start making pledges to social justice, and social justice became a term. And all of these corporations making pledges of what they were going to do. And then you had the conversations around police reform and defunding the police and abolish this and abolish that and all of these different conversations. And now we need to have more conversations on race. And there's all kind of race panels on all the news networks. And YouTube decided to do Black Voices and Black Creator or whatever they were doing. And all these different things that took place just to get somewhat of a fraction of justice for George Floyd. And that was just for him. Police killings are not going to stop. We've had a whole bunch ever since. You know what I mean? There's literally one every other day that we're talking about. And so all of that had to happen just for this instance where you get Derek Chauvin who gets 22.5 years. And in reality, we know he's only going to do like 13, 14 and get to go home. So I just started thinking about that. I'm like, dang, there is so much more to get done because I don't know if I can see this as justice because really, justice would mean that the minute, well, one, justice would mean he wasn't killed at all. He would still be here. But the second element to that is it would have meant that you wouldn't have needed a viral video for George Floyd to get justice. The other police should have stepped in and stopped everything as it was going, but they were all complicit in all of it. You know what I mean? And so there's just so many layers to all of this. And that's why I say, like, all of this, it's so systemic. And it's just like, man, so many layers. And then when you get to the sentencing and his mother gets up there, Derek Chauvin's mom, and says that bit about, you know, she's trying to get the sympathy. Every parent does that when their child goes to jail. You don't want to see your child go for however many years, but she centered herself in all of it as if she was more valuable than the rest of us. When she said that bit about when you're sentencing him, you're sentencing me. Okay, well, you can go join him. Look, you raised him that way. Clearly, whatever morals he had, it came from you. So you go on. Y'all can share a cell together. I don't mind if they want to share one. Who we got to call? If mom wants to sit in the cell with him, cool. When you're sentencing him, you're sentencing me. What am I supposed to do with that? And that's supposed to make me say, oh, no, we don't want to see another white woman suffer. So, how about... Let's just let him go. And that's one of the bits that was even insulting as well. Like, with the defense recommending just probation and time served. Like, the way they play in people's faces, this is the stuff I be talking about. And it's because if they could have gotten away with that, they would have gotten away with that. And I think what makes it even worse, there's no remorse. The mother barely had any kind of remorse with all of it. And then Derek Chauvin, he could give two F words. He just, they don't even care. And I think that's the other bit. Like, when you saw the video and you saw the lack of empathy. And when he said that line a bit, well, if you couldn't breathe, you wouldn't be talking. Stuff like that. And then you want me to feel bad because, now he has to do time. And you think because you went up there and you don't want to see your son go to jail and it's going to hurt you that he's in jail, I'm supposed to have some kind of empathy for you when there's an entire family that lost a relative, when there's a girl that lost her father, when there are people who lost somebody in their community all over some petty stuff. And then you want to center it on you and act like you have so much value that we're supposed to stop and consider your feelings. You see the way that y'all center yourselves and everything? I cannot. I really can't. Like, man, tried it. The nerve. My goodness. When you're sentencing him, you're sentencing me. Lock her up too. Somebody find something she did. Go dig up her record like y'all be digging up black folks. I know she done did something in the past. Like, my goodness. Anyway, it's so crazy because, again, George Floyd is like one little piece of the pie. There are so many others who are not going to get justice, which kind of doesn't sit well with me. There's so many where we're going to continue to see the same foolery where things happen and people get off. And so I'm just like, man, all of that had to take place for 22.5 years. In reality, it's going to be 13 or 14. But absolutely crazy. And then they really had the nerve to say, well, how about we just give them probation? They don't even value black lives like that at all. Probation. We'll see what happens with these other 3 officers that are all going to trial as well. By the way, I did want to have this conversation as well in relation to that sentencing because you're going to start seeing the pendulum swing the other way in response to the fact that you're starting to see a few more officers actually have to do time for the crimes that they commit against everyday citizens. You saw Amber Geiger get like 10 years, even though she's already appealing. So even after all of the forgiveness Olympics and can I hug her and the people brushing her hair and giving her a Bible and saying they can't wait to have her over for dinner once she gets out and everything like that, even after all of that, she still had no remorse and feels that she shouldn't be in jail. And so you see that she has an appeal going on. And with Derek Chauvin, the same foolery kind of happening. But now you're seeing different laws come into play and everything that they can do to somewhat reverse things so that this doesn't happen anymore, where in an instance where the police are in the wrong, they have more protections. You're seeing it. I just saw Ohio come out with what you call Bill 22 or House Bill 22. Let me read a portion of it. House Bill 22 would expand Ohio obstruction of justice laws by including failure to follow a lawful order from police or diverting a law enforcement officer's attention. The bill's sponsors say it would protect both police and the public from harm when police are attempting to clear crime scenes, make arrests, or maintain order, and is supported by the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association, Buckeye Sheriff Association, Ohio Highway Patrol, and the Fraternal Order of Police. Opponents argue the proposed law is so broad it could subject bystanders from taking cell phone video of police activity during protests or demonstrations. Now, what did we just say a few minutes ago where I said, had that video not been released, where would we be today? And I think that's one of the things that's happening. And it's not just Ohio. You've seen other states and cities and towns and counties make laws where it's illegal to film police. There's all kind of things happening. We're now in a space where even when you ask for a badge officer or a badge number from an officer, they don't even give it to you no more and they don't care. It is what it is. We saw they had no problem assaulting news anchors on live TV. We saw them throw tear gas. Even with the whole bit with literally when Trump did the whole thing with standing by the Bible and they tear gas those random protesters. Like, at this point, it's a free-for-all, do what you gotta do kind of thing as far as what the police are doing. And so now you're seeing a thing where they're going to make sure that the police is still protected at any cost, mainly because a lot of police are leaving the force. They don't want to have a conversation about accountability, any kind of conversation about reform or anything like that. They're not having it. And so you're watching people quit. You just saw what happened in Portland where you saw a lot of police quit. And so because of that, it's now like, oh, well, let's find ways to protect them. In reality, my thing is, if they're quitting because there's a risk that they may be on camera while they stump somebody's face out, if they're quitting because there's a risk that they may be on camera while they kill somebody who's unjustifiably being killed, and I've already said in America it's just so normalized for the police to kill us that we think it's okay where if somebody doesn't comply they deserve to die. That's just normalized here. But at this point, if it's gotten to the point where police are frustrated because they're being held accountable and they want to quit, those are the ones you need to get rid of, because that's exactly who the system protects. That's why they say you can't really reform police, because a system backs them, a system protects them, and then half of the ones that are in there that are doing the wrong, there's no remorse. They don't care. They know that they have backing. They know that they have that blue wall that's going to protect them, and it is what it is. And now you're seeing the governments kind of jump in and say, okay, well, let's make sure that we make it so people can't record, so that we don't have any more viral videos. Let's make it so we can claim, oh, because they were standing way across the street with a cell phone, it was making me have to struggle to do my job. I was in danger because I was distracted, and so you're obstructing justice. And it's like, y'all got smoke for all of that, let alone I'm watching people get probation for storming the Capitol. You know what I mean? Even with Derek Chauvin's sentencing, you know, a lot of people made a bunch of different posts on the internet talking about people who are serving 50 and 60 and lifelong sentences for non-violent crimes, but because they were a part of any kind of old 3-strike law or mandatory minimums and everything else like that, some people are literally done for. And then you have somebody who kills somebody on camera in slow motion for 9 minutes unapologetically and wore their shades while doing it, and you know, they get to kind of pretty much skate and get the sympathy of a lot of people, because I'm sure there's going to be people donating to his mother, and like she said, you know, she's also being sentenced too. This is where we're at. So I just hope people kind of pay attention. You're going to start seeing all kind of foolery, just like with voting and how you're seeing states come out with all these new oppressive laws and ways to stop people from voting, to the point where now the Department of Justice has to sue the state of Georgia, and I'm sure they're going to sue other states as well. In the same realm that you're seeing that happen in the world of voting, same thing's going to happen in policing. They're going to find every way to kind of protect the old guard, because again, that's just pretty much what this country is built on, and they're not about to sit here and undo stuff at you know, the request of the masses who are calling for change, because for them it's like, no, we got to keep y'all in order and keep y'all in place. So y'all got some nerve thinking you about to make demands around here. So here we are. Even with the companies that made all these pledges for what they're going to do in relation to social justice, they made all these pledges in 2020, and most of them didn't even put the money out that they claimed that they were going to donate to wherever, or put towards whatever, you know, movement they were going to support. All of that is crap. They're not doing anything. I said the pendulum is going back to the way things were. That's what they're pushing towards. So just kind of keep an eye open, because you know, you start looking and observing, you start seeing all kind of stuff. And then in relation to the building that collapsed in Surfside, Florida, one, you know, condolences to everybody affected by that. That is absolutely crazy. It's almost scary to think about too, because I think what makes it so horrible is for people who have lost somebody, it's one thing when you get your closure because maybe they died from a health condition, or they died just because of old age, or they died in their sleep. But when something traumatic or gruesome happens, I think it's a different kind of hurt, because you knew that they went in such a way that was a way that they didn't deserve. You know what I mean? I'm not saying everybody that's been affected is now gone, but you know, for those who have passed on, I think that's one of the things that the victims' families have to think about, which is something that's very heavy and very hard to deal with it. And just the fact that, you know, eventually it's going to turn into a recovery mission in a few days, so that window of finding survivors continues to get closer and smaller and smaller and smaller, which is absolutely terrible. And so I'm like, I hope everything works out for everybody who's affected, but that has to be really hard. And even for the people who survived, when you deal with kind of like, you know, survivor's remorse, and even the people who lived on the section that did not collapse, you know, their entire lives are uprooted. They're not going to let those people go back in there to get their stuff, because you don't know if the second half is going to come down. And so I'm sure at this point nobody's allowed back in there, which means people have to leave a lot of items behind, you know, childhood pictures, you know, great grandmother's engagement ring, things that are sentimental. All of that stuff has to go with the building, sadly. Even the dogs are depressed, and I'm talking about the search and rescue dogs. I was watching on the news this morning, and they were saying that even the dogs, if they're not successful at finding survivors quick enough or enough in a reasonable amount of time, they start to get depressed, and they have to switch out the dogs and bring in another one. I was like, wow, this is just absolutely crazy. But I think that is so tough, and the fact that it happened in the middle of the night and there was no real warning, and it's just, man, that's why I say you just never know what happens. This is why I always say, like, you really have to live life to the fullest, because anything can happen. Like, literally anything. All of those people who unfortunately had to experience that, they didn't realize their world would turn upside down overnight. They had already done their day. They had already gone to work. They had already knocked out whatever labor-intensive things they had to do, and they were in their bed sleeping peacefully, and then boom, look what happens. And so it's a very scary thing. I just, absolutely terrible. I'm hoping they're able to find more survivors. Right now, I think they've only found, a handful, really. Right now, I think there's still 156 or 159 that are still unaccounted for. And it's just like, you think of all of those floors that just literally collapse on each other. And it's going to, sadly, when it switches to a recovery and some of the things that the people are going to discover as they're trying to recover people, like, that's another thing you have to think about, the mental health of what it's like to find such horrid discovery. So I think there's going to be a lot to unfold out of this story. It kind of reminds me of Grenfell Tower in the UK almost, as far as just such a massive tragedy that happened so quickly, where people are unsuspecting and things just happen so quickly and you're not able to get out. And so that's scary. It really is. I hate to end on such a somber note, but so condolences to everybody affected by that. I always hate to have to see the people, cry or suffer or, just not have closure. Or, there's going to be some people, sadly, who may not ever know what happened to their loved one. They may never find somebody, and that's one of the things that's really difficult in those situations. And so I hope everything works out for everybody affected. And I hope a lot of these cities are paying attention to infrastructure, because you're seeing things start to happen all around the country with different buildings that are either not up to code or they fall apart, and they haven't really given us a real explanation about what really happened yet. A lot of people think it may have been sinkholes. Some people think it's just the building wasn't up to code. All kind of different theories, but it's one of the reasons why you have to constantly invest in maintaining anything you build. We did a video talking about how a lot of buildings in the United States aren't built very well, and really, especially even regular single-family homes, are really only built to withstand 20 or 30 years before they start falling apart if you don't do the maintenance, in comparison to homes in different countries that whether they use cobblestone or something else as opposed to just wood. Now, this was a high-rise, so it had a different buildup, but again, I just hope everything works out. That was a horrible thing to wake up to when I watched the news about that, because again, it's just, it's the beginning of the summer. This is normally a really happy time for a lot of people, but what a gruesome way to start the summer. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.
What can I say? Or was it right? The wave only to you, straight from my heart. They still yours. They feel love, you're mine. Can we interchase it to your favorite place, and baby, my love, want me in name, yeah, giving it all for my baby. What we become together is one, yeah, and we're redefining our friendship from time in the run in this marathon now, 'cause I'm loving you and you loving it, and our frequency is so prominent.